Hello and welcome to another episode of Hypnopompic State, a series of short videos developed for the Dreamscope Artist Toolkit. We are Alex
and Leo, foreign artists and fabricators starting a business in the UK. Together, we form like Voltron to become Hypnopomp, a company making guitars and what have you for the discerning consumer. Today, we're going to dive into the history of one of the most iconic and polarizing guitar body styles, the Flying V. Follow us down, dear viewer, as we examine the history behind it and how such a design made it to the market.
The Strat, the Tele, the SG, the Les Paul. Some guitars are so iconic they've dominated the music industry for decades. But lurking just to the side of them has been a consistent design perfect for guitarists looking to make more of a visual statement with their choice of acts. But how did such an outlandish design come to be, and who are the mavericks who have had the metal to rock it on stage?
It all started, funnily enough, with the release of the Fender Stratocaster in 1954. As the two juggernauts of the electric guitar scene, Fender and Gibson have had a long history of fierce competition, driving many of the features that are treasured by guitarists to this day, and in this, they are true to form. Once Gibson realized how fantastically iconic the Stratocaster design was going to be, they knew they needed to come up with something special in order to secure their share of the market. The president at the time, Ted McCarty, thought the answer to this puzzle was in a futuristic modernist style to compete with the space-agey Stratocaster. He brought in concept artists and landed on three rather revolutionary designs. They became the Explorer, the Moderne, and of course, the Flying V, and were released in 1958. I wonder how well they sold.
The answer is, they didn't. Not really. From the inception of the electric guitar, manufacturers had tried to emulate the curves and contours of its acoustic origins, as this was familiar and comfortable to players, though a solid-body electric has no need to be any shape in particular. Turns out, the Stratocaster struck the perfect balance between being ergonomically futuristic, yet familiar enough to be a comfortable purchase. The Flying V was in production for just about a year before being discontinued in 1959, with another brief uprising in 1963 when they made some from spare materials.
That is, until 1967 rolled around and Gibson committed to trying to make it commercially viable. It maintained many of the elements of the original Carina version, but switched the wood to full mahogany, added a bigger pickguard, and switched to the standard stop bar tailpiece common on Gibson models. The company has been manufacturing this design from then until the present, and this type of design remains an option from many other manufacturers as well. So what happened to make this from a no-go to the niche hit that it is today?
The answer, as usual with guitar designs, is musician support. Famous people playing good songs with good guitars on stage is a good way to get consumers out there buying. For the Flying V design, this took decades, rather than years, to take effect. From the get-go, a couple of iconic musicians jumped on the design, blues rock pioneer Lonnie Mack and blues legend Albert King. The Flying V is synonymous with their image and brand as musicians. This wasn't enough to prop up the product in the face of competition, shipping just 81 of the Vs in 58, a crushing defeat. When Gibson committed to the design in 67, it didn't exactly take off relative to their other models, even when stars like Dave Davies, Keith Richards, and Jimi Hendrix dabbled with the instrument.
This caused them to try to revamp interest in it in 1978 with a new model, the Flying V2. The design was pricey, used strange boomerang pickups that sounded like single coils, and was too heavy. Predictably, the design wasn't profitable, even when Gibson took steps to fix these fatal design flaws. The design was abandoned in '83, and Gibson limped back to the original. It wasn't until a few more artists like Eddie Van Halen and Tom Petty jumped on board with the aggressive look and dual humbucker-driven sound that things started to turn around.
It had also started to get a foothold in the hard rock and heavy metal scene, propelled mainly by European acts like the Scorpions and UFO, as musicians sought to have a more aggressive look that differentiated them from other genres, even though the first to adopt it were in the blues. Furthermore, the Flying V and its sister guitar, the Explorer, became synonymous with heavy metal in the 80s, thanks to their use by Kirk Hammett and James Hetfield of Metallica. With enough strong associations made with the instrument, the Flying V secured its spot as a niche, but still relatively commonplace style for guitarists looking to stand out and be memorable.
Gibson added novelty to the style with the interesting reverse Flying V and the V bass. However, none of these were major players in the market, relegated to collector's items, though the limited runs of the reverse actually sold out. Speaking of collector's items, say you're convinced and you want a piece of history, an original Carina 1958 Flying V. Sounds easy, right?
Wrong! The original V is one of the most expensive vintage guitars in existence, sitting between roughly $200,000 and $250,000 a pop. This is probably driven by multiple factors. The fact that they were discontinued almost immediately, and the outlandish shape of them probably foremost. You could also be savvy, like collector Steven Seagal, who is rumored to have picked up 3 of Albert King's actual Flying Vs, named Lucy, after the King sold them or lost them gambling.
So what do you think? Will the Flying V continue to capture a share of the market, or will this design slowly phase out in favor of other memorable guitars like Strandberg's innovative and ergonomic designs? Catch us next week, where we'll join the rest of the world and recommend avenues for using creative skills for the greater good and your neighborhood during COVID-19. Until then, remember that a bad idea can be turned into a good idea if you just try it over and over for 30 years until the kids think it's hip.